Can we start with Jerry Matas? Can you kind of address what the legal definition is of a car sale and what curbstoning is and why it is illegal?
Well, curbstoning came about a long time ago, actually, where selling a used vehicle under the pretense that the seller is the vehicle owner when they aren't. And even today, while the name came from the trick of using a public location to meet and conduct the sale of a vehicle in a parking lot or on the curbside of the street, more and more we're starting to see transactions happening online, which makes it more difficult. So a legal sale, I mean, there's two types of sales. You can have an independent sale from a private seller, which could be legitimate, but in this case, in curbstoning, it may not be. And then you have a legitimate car sale that happens at a business where everything takes place at the business location.
And Jason Wagner, if you would also kind of expand on that a little bit from your department, when you're looking at a sale, whether it's on the curb or legitimate dealer or online or anything, is there specific things that the buyer could look for to make sure that they're not participating with an illegal dealer?
Well, they can. Ultimately, it's hard if you can't ask somebody for their driver's license and compare it to what's on the title. I mean, that would be the best way. But there are some red flags. I mean, we even see temp tags or demo tags that are being used. I mean, that's a red flag because no private sale from a legitimate owner would have, any kind of temporary permit or tag on the vehicle. Stickers on the windshield. Typically dealers, when they're advertising, will use some kind of fluorescent sticker with the price or the year. Things like that would be a red flag if you see them. Several cars on a street corner where it almost looks like, a dealer's lot is another thing. I know, private sales can be legitimate and people look for locations to sell their vehicles, but when you start seeing these areas regularly used, it's a red flag. But unless you're in this business and you've dealt with this, people are just looking for a good deal on a car. They're not too interested until it goes wrong and they have a problem with the car, they can't get the title, or they have to pay double the sales tax because it was a double transfer, that they really start getting upset about what happened. So there's some things like that, but it's really, unless you're in the business and you know what to look for, it's really hard to get somebody to easily be able to tell if it's a curbstoner without really asking for their license and comparing it to the title.
So,
or making sure
Brian,
the vehicle has a license plate on it is another red flag. You see vehicles parked without license plates. Well, it shouldn't be on the road. How did it get to that location to be sold? If it was my vehicle and it was registered to me, it would have a license plate, and that's how I'm legally able to drive it to that location and park it, as long as I have that property owner's permission, written permission. So there are some red flags, but it's not that easy to identify a lot of times for the layman, you could say.
Well, and I think those are some good things to look for. I have, been coming to understand this problem more and more and more, and continue to learn more things because, like you said, it's not exactly obvious who the owner of the vehicle is. Brian Baca is Executive Director of the Better Business Bureau here for New Mexico and Southern Colorado. Brian, when there's a problem, a lot of times there's no way to get back with the person who was selling the car, whether they were using a burner or whether they were using some other method to try and solicit the buyer. So the only recourse sometimes, somebody who's bought an illegal vehicle is to contact the Better Business Bureau. Do you have any feel for what the level of impact this has actually been on the state economy, and how many of those calls you might be fielding a month?
So this is, and what was surprising in starting this whole conversation less than a month ago with Mark Powell with Independent Auto Dealers is, and even when we did our interview on Monday, is how how the public does not know any of this. And so this is something that, we've started the awareness with Independent Auto Dealer and the Better Biz Bureau, and part of our mission is on the consumer side. So now we'll have some data. We'll try to gather some data to be able to see what kind of calls, because a lot of these are legal issues too that you see, and you call the police because these folks that are buying these cars from these illegal dealers, they're getting away. These dealers are getting these cars, and the taxation revenues, and not getting the money that is due through the selling process. And there's just so many risks to the consumers buying vehicles like this from illegal dealers, because a lot of them have been salvaged and have had body work done to them to get them looking nice and ready to sell. Some may have been stolen vehicles as well, but when you buy vehicles like this, you don't have the warranty and the consumer protection that you need. So there's no recourse for consumers when they get stuck like this from illegal dealers, because they've been fallen victims to a crime, basically.
Well, and I think that you and I've talked several times about certain industries that come up quite often as being ID'd. This is not an industry. This is basically like we're talking about. We're not talking about the legitimate dealers, because we know that a lot of the complaints that come in are from new car sales and used car sales. Well, those are all legitimate dealers in which you could have another recourse. In this particular case, you're actually talking about people that are operating outside the rules, outside the laws. Is there any recourse, and maybe this is another place for Jerry Matas with the Attorney General's office to step in as well? Is there any other recourse once you've got yourself in a situation? I mean, should they be contacting the AG's office and making them aware of where this transaction was, who they operated with? What kind of recourse would there be now that they've fallen victim to this?
Thank you for that's a great question. And yes, anytime somebody falls prey to this type of sale, they can contact our office and file a complaint with our office. It still makes it very difficult, as Jason said. A lot of times what happens is, people really don't see the red flags until something goes wrong. So a lot of times these people are looking for a good deal, something, super inexpensive to just get to work, to take their kids to school. And they're not thinking about going through a traditional process or a registered dealer, because they're just looking for something very inexpensive. And I think even more so in this time, with the pandemic and people losing their jobs, the struggle to have something that's reliable and to pay a little bit more is definitely apparent. But I guess it would depend on what type of paperwork they have, because then we go back to, is this a private sale? How was the paperwork filled out? The title? There's so much more involved that would assist our office. But then if it is a private sale from a private individual, it makes it more difficult. If we're not able to get in touch with this person, then it becomes a civil matter, where somebody may have to go through either magistrate court or speak to an attorney. So it makes it difficult depending on how the process plays out.
Well, I guess from your explanation to that, it also bodes, why seeing it at a public place, if it's in front of a person's place of business, at least there would be some contact information there. Or if this was a private sale and it was at a personal residence, at least you would have like an address or something to kind of find out what's going on. I think that this is a perfect example of, we do all understand that money is tight. New car sales are down because of their inability to get things, to get chips and to be able to sell cars. So a lot more people are looking for used cars, quality used cars, as well as they don't have the money. They're probably the most impacted from that, is because of their economic status. And they need to get to work, if they're fortunate enough to have a job. But I think that makes sense as far as being able to follow some documentation. I do also realize I started this without saying who I am. My name is David Swelp. I'm the host of the New Mexico Motorsports Report. So I'm really connected with the car community, as well as working directly with the New Mexico Independent Auto Dealers Association. I'd like to invite Mark Powell into this discussion. You've got over 1,000 members of the NMIADA. They work very hard to maintain their compliance and their licensing and everything in order to help protect the public. I'd like you to kind of speak to how the association has been directly trying to benefit the community by getting this awareness out.
Thanks, David, and I just want to thank everyone again for being here today. Let me just start with sort of summarizing what other folks have said about what curbstoning is not. What curbstoning is not is someone who owns a vehicle, and you're allowed as an individual, as a private individual in New Mexico, to sell up to 4 cars a year. And the rule is those cars have to be registered and titled in your name. That's the rule. Over 4 cars, you are a dealer in the eyes of the state of New Mexico. And the question is, are you a legal dealer or an illegal dealer? And curbstoning is these illegal dealers. It's not somebody who loves hot rods and fixes a couple up a year and sells them for a profit. That's totally allowable, just as long as they're registered and titled in the name of the seller. And I agree that that's like the #1 issue when you're buying a vehicle online. But it's important for people to know the level of responsibility and education and licensing that dealers, real dealers, legitimate dealers have. So legitimate independent dealer, #1, is going to have a location with a sign, and they're going to have insurance. So they're going to have a garage policy. They're going to have an errors and emissions policy. They will have spent hundreds and even thousands of dollars on pre-licensing education. They must also do annual 4 hours of continuing education. They also have to provide a 15-day, 500-mile warranty on every vehicle that they sell in the state of New Mexico, giving a level of protection to their neighbors and to consumers. And the other thing that they do in this state is provide a prior wreck inspection. So any repair damage that's ever been done to a vehicle that's more than 6% of the cost is disclosed to the consumer, so that the consumer really knows as much as possible about the vehicle. And that's really sort of the duty of care that these dealers understand and work toward ensuring that our neighbors are taken care of, and that they're getting safe and reliable transportation. It's important to note that it's our most vulnerable neighbors that are often caught up in these illegal schemes, because look, if you don't have reliable transportation in New Mexico, you can't participate fully in society. So we totally understand why folks seek the best value they can, and no one's expecting to get taken advantage of. And gosh, here at the association, we probably get 3 to 5 calls every single week from people across the state who've been in one way or another taken advantage of by one of these illegal dealers. So that's sort of why we want to make sure. And look, this is not a small problem. Some 71% of used vehicle transactions in the US are private sales. So this is not a small number of these happening every day. And that's why you see it. You will see it at abandoned restaurants, old strip malls that don't have much in them. You just see car after car after car. And these are the illegal dealers that we're talking about.
Well, and as I disclosed earlier, being involved in the New Mexico Motorsports Report and actually being involved with collector cars and different types of things, I really noticed that there is a kind of a misunderstanding of what we're trying to do here, and what we're trying to, educate and create more awareness, that, a lot of these guys as a hobby do buy and sell and trade, and it's not as a business, it's a hobby. And so further educating people that this is not in any way to stop your independence as an individual, your right to be able to buy and sell. What this is about protecting the public, and maybe their unawareness of that there are people that are playing both sides of the line. There are people in this business who are selling cars illegally as well as selling them legally. I'd like to go back to Jason Wagner and ask him a question here. As far as investigation, are you receiving it after there's someone who has had said that the transaction didn't go, or there's no recourse, or are you hearing from like the AG's office or even the NMIADA that somebody might be outside of compliance? What is your process in this?
Well, it comes in any one of those forms. Typically, it's, somebody has a vehicle they purchased and something goes wrong, so then they reach out. But, NMIDA, other dealers, a lot of times are calling because they're upset that cars parked on street corners constantly. And so it comes in different forms, but I would say most of it is before the sale even happens. I mean,
Okay.
like I say, unless something goes wrong, is anybody going to complain? Because if they felt like they got a good deal on a car, they really don't care where it comes from. They just want a good deal on a car and save money. So it's typically just when there's a title issue, or they're paying the double tax, or there's prior damage that they found out afterwards, then they start reaching out to the AG's office or my office, and they should, because a lot of times, we might not be able to go back and track down who sold it or do something about it, but we can sometimes track down that it came from another legitimate dealer who may have sold it on the side, because even legitimate dealers curbstone and facilitate it. So I've had it to where I can contact that dealer, and they know that there's penalties and it can jeopardize their license. So a lot of times they'll buy the car back or make it right somehow. But there's a lot of different facets to it. I mean, and it's really difficult and challenging to prove these cases, because they don't want to put a name on a title and pay the tax and register it. So in order for me to be able to prove that they've sold more than 4 cars a year, that's really what I need, is that paper trail and proof that they sold it. So it's really a tough situation. And until we can get something either changed to the legislature or with our titling process, maybe electronic title, can we really tackle it on a different level completely?
Well, you mentioned getting laws on the books. There already are some laws on the books, and I'll open this up to either Jerry, Jason, yourself, or even Mark. There are laws on the books about registering your car, and this is where it specifically comes back to who is on the title, and it's not an open title, because the avoidance of paying a registration fee through multiple levels of just signing basically the bill of sale on there facilitates there's laws on the books to try and protect people from that. And I think that they're completely unaware of the fact that they have to go back and pay those registration fees for all of those steps. This is a risk that the public is completely unaware of, and yet there's a law on the books. Why is that not being enforced, or why is it not being enforced as much as it should be on the level of actually registering a vehicle?
So let's just walk out through a scenario. Let's say I buy a vehicle on a street corner. I go to MVD to register it and title it, and I figure out that I'm going to have to pay, twice the tax, because whoever I got it from gave me a bill of sale with a different name than what's on the title. So now we have 2 different individuals. One's claiming ownership, and then one's on the title. So I'm going to have to pay double the tax. Well, if MVD just turned that person away, that customer is basically stuck with a vehicle, because if they cannot get back to who they bought it from. And if that person's even willing to then put it in their name and legitimately sell it or give them the money back, well, then they're stuck with a vehicle. And what they're going to end up doing is maybe a surety bond process, which is a way to get a title. So really, it just hurts that consumer more than it does solving the problem or any consequences for who sold it for the curbstoner. So I think MVD has come to the realization is that, we just can't turn people away, but they're going to have to pay that tax. Otherwise, they're just going to be sitting with a car that they can't drive. So until we get some laws that are a little bit better on the actual illegal sales, and we can get law enforcement to start taking a look at this and paying attention to it, can we really make some headway?
So I think to surmise, the law was good, but hadn't fully reached the ramifications of who it could be impacting, and it just needs to be improved.
Right, and it's just going to give them a late penalty that they're going to have to pay for the registration not done within 30 days. So that's the concept. But again, it's on the purchaser, the buyer of the vehicle. It's not against anybody that it really should be against.
So I did receive a question, and people were kind of starting to think about, well, how can consumers protect themselves? What would be the first sign that they would look for, and how would they protect themselves from maybe some things that they're unaware of that they're taking risk on?
I
Well,
think
I'd say if I was purchasing a vehicle, I'd ask to see their license, the title, and to confirm it has a license plate and that it's actually registered to that person. I think that's the biggest thing right there, to make sure that the vehicle is registered to the person you're buying it from. I think that would be the step one. Mark or Jerry, you have any others that you think would be top of the list?
I think this is Brian. I think another that's like the best way is identifying the driver's license and matching to the title. But when a consumer is thinking about purchasing one of these vehicles, is taking them to the mechanic and getting it inspected before they purchase it.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
Get the Carfax off the VIN number.
Otherwise, just buy from a licensed dealer at a car lot. Beyond that, I don't know how well you can protect yourself if you don't have it inspected. You don't see that it's actually registered to that person. You're taking the risk.
Now, I saw Mark. I was on the distribution list last week on an email that Mark Powell sent, and it was about the titles. Not that you can't go into MVD or motor vehicles and walk out with the title anymore, that you have to wait for it to come through the mail. I was wondering if this was a policy that was in place to help curb this issue, or if it had anything to do with it. Sorry, David.
I think Jason might be able to answer that better, but I think it was more, there's a generalized, both between the MVD offices that the state runs plus the partner offices. I think there have been a sufficient number of sort of individuals who have misused their position, maybe stolen a few titles or mislabeled, or so. I think more the idea, but somebody can correct me, was to reduce that risk to close to zero. So, all the MVDs will still be doing license plates and registrations and green slips, but the state wants to control the printing of the titles and control. It's really, I think, about control of the blank titles, because when those are stolen or disappear, because there are so many state offices and so many partner offices, the bad eggs tend to put the state in a bad position. So I think that's why. Jerry or Jason, do you know any other reason?
That's correct. That's correct. It was just to secure the titles and that they're all coming from a central location. We've had thousands at a time stolen from partner offices because, that is a valuable commodity, and they're popping up in Texas and other states. So I think it was part of that. I don't know if there were any other issues, but.
So
Jerry,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to, expand on your question as to how consumers can prevent becoming a victim. And, what Jason said is first and foremost, if you can find out who the seller is, because usually in a shady deal, they're not going to be forthcoming about that information, or they're going to have several excuses as to why the names don't match, why, they may, a lot of times we hear, oh, I'm being transferred with the military and I'm selling this for someone else, or, there's always a reason why they don't have everything together. The other thing I would like to point out is matching the mileage and the VIN from the vehicle to those documents, to whatever documents they're providing, because there's a lot of concerns when you talk about a salvage title. There's also odometer tampering. As you all said previously, the vehicle could be stolen. There's a lot of flood damage vehicles that have been circulating, all those types of things that you want to ensure that this vehicle wasn't from a chop shop. There's so many things that are involved. The other thing that, when you talk about a Carfax, I think it's an important first step and it's a tool, but it's not always going to share everything. There could be, I was actually a victim of this myself. And I grew up in the car business, but there can be damage that's not reported, extensive damage. But it's really important because it does show the vehicle history as best it can. You can see the service history. You can see if there's a branded title, any recalls, those types of things. And then other things that they can do, and, Jason's office, they can call and verify. I've had complaints that have come into our office where they've said that they've bought it at a dealership. Turns out it was a salesperson that actually purchased the vehicle from the dealer himself and then was selling it on the side, but telling the consumer that it was from the dealership. So you can contact the licensing bureau where Jason's at to verify if it's a legitimate dealer. We've had online sales that there have been complaints with all bogus paperwork. It's not there. They'll hijack a dealer's website and utilize that in the transaction. And they can call and verify whether this is a legitimate dealer. Most of these types of sales, like I said, they're not going to be, forthcoming with the information. So I would just say, echo what Jason said, but also ask questions. How long have they owned the vehicle? Why are they selling it? Do they have maintenance records? Ask the question if it's been in an accident. And, the red flags will be the push to sell the vehicle. I've got a lot of buyers. You don't have time. Anytime they're pushing for that is when people really should refuse to participate.
Jerry, would you mind kind of explaining once again kind of what the lemon law is, and basically one of the advantages of being able to go to a licensed dealer and that protection you get?
Sure. So, and just to, since we're talking about used vehicles, the lemon law for used vehicles, as it was stated earlier, all dealers are required to warranty the vehicle to be fit for the purposes for what it's intended to obviously operate, 15 days or 500 miles from the date of purchase. So that means that any sticker that says as is on the car is in violation. There's no way to sell a vehicle from a reputable dealer that's licensed as is. So whichever occurs first, the 15-day or 500-mile. Now, this isn't completely set in stone. I've had complaints that we've worked where people have reached out to us, and it has been after the 15-day or 500-mile. But where we can trace back to where maybe the vehicle wasn't serviced, or this might have been a problem before the sale that it wasn't fixed, there's also ways for us still to assist. And I have to say that most of the dealers that I've worked with in handling complaints are very forthcoming and provide paperwork, and we'll say, listen, tell them to bring it back in and we'll do this or that. Okay. So the dealership has to be given the opportunity to repair the vehicle. So sometimes people will say, I just want to take the car back, or I don't want it anymore, but that's not always up to them. As the dealership wants to take the vehicle back and unwind the sale, they have that option to do that. I think it's really up to the consumer as well to notify them. You know, there's certain situations where the consumer will drop the vehicle off, or, you know, just say they don't want it. I think the important thing is the dialogue and the communication between either Jason's office or our office, that we're involved and we're trying to come up with an agreement between both parties. So when people think about buying at the dealer, that they don't want to do that, that is something that they have as a protection. These, you know, when you have a curbstoner, they do that to make fast cash, and they're evading the taxes that they would have to pay, or the regulations that, as Mark said, all these businesses that spend thousands of dollars to have a legitimate business, it's that's what they're trying to evade. And so then the consumers are losing out on those protections that they're getting.
So
Otherwise.
Jerry, how would people reach out to you? What's the best way to communicate with you?
Oh, we have actually several ways for people to reach out. We actually have an online portal where they can actually file a complaint online and submit documents. They can attach documents, and that's at our website, which is www.nm for New Mexico, ag.gov, G-O-V as in Victor. And it's very easy to follow. There's a button that just says file a complaint, and it walks them through the process. Then we have 3 offices. We have our Albuquerque office, Santa Fe office, and Las Cruces office. And we do have a toll-free number, and that can go through every office, and they can go through the prompt to speak to one of our advocates in our advocacy and intervention division. That number is 844-255-9210.
Thank you for that. Jason,
And they can come into our office as well. I apologize, but they can also walk in and do that in our office as well.
Well, thank you. And Jason, how could people reach out to you? How could they contact you?
Well, they can call our office, which is 505-383-2316, or go online. We also have a complaint form online where they can submit the complaint documents and all the vehicle information, and they can get there at www.mvd.newmexico.gov. And yeah, it's like Jerry says, it's really important that a consumer, they do their research and get as much paperwork and verifying the VIN number and just do their due diligence when they're buying these vehicles, not from dealers. We've seen all the nightmare situations, and I think they learn after one that they probably won't do that again when they've gone through the hassles of having a vehicle they can't title for months and months, or repairs and damage that they didn't know about. So I really appreciate this venue where we can discuss this and hopefully start changing the direction on these illegal dealers.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. Brian,
Yes.
how would people reach out to the Better Business Bureau? What is the best way for them to communicate with you?
So I have had to think about this one, David, and that's why in my earlier comments that on the BBB side, this is like a legal matter, or we would forward it to the Attorney General's office. But we have the same process on bbb.org to file a complaint with the business. And the difference that I've been trying to think about is when consumers file complaints with an actual business. So we wouldn't have a way to these are illegal dealers that aren't in business. So what we would refer these consumers to be able to report it on our on the scam alerts on the bbb.org website. This is probably something that would initiate this, and being able to to track it for us and reporting these consumers reporting it as a scam. We take in the dollars that were attempted or that they lost. But if a consumer was to call our office, we would give them the number and refer them to the Attorney General's office for something like this.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, how would people reach out to the New Mexico Independent Auto Dealers Association?
Yeah, by phone, people report a lot of curbstoning to us. We have a special page on our website, www.nmiada.com. You can upload photos, you can upload addresses, and we forward that to MVD, and we keep a database ourselves so that we understand what's going on. And I did want to just touch on, we have focused very much on individual consumer protection, and we haven't spoken really at all about the societal costs of this illegal industry. And let me start with the fact that when you have an open title, no one knows who owns that vehicle. So public safety officials are at risk when they pull over a vehicle that they have no idea who owns the vehicle. These vehicles are often used in money laundering operations. They are utilized in other crimes because there's no capacity to tell who owns the vehicle. And, it's worth noting that 28% of the cars on the road in New Mexico are completely uninsured. And many of these are open title vehicles. So the more that we can deal with this issue, the more we can kind of reduce the degree to which automobiles are utilized in other criminal activity. And I think it's really important to note that, as of now, it's a $300 fine and a misdemeanor for an illegal car dealer. And with the kind of crime and the size of our local and state police forces just aren't large enough to deal with these kinds of issues. And so, this is important, and I do think there needs to be new legislation. We are trying to consider proposing legislation that would require all private car sales to be consummated at an MVD or an MVD partner office. We are working in an early stage with a number of government sort of organizations, MVD, and what sort of risks are there and does it make sense? But ultimately, we do that with guns in our state. If there's a private sale of a gun, you got to go to a gun shop and register it so that the proper background checks can be done. Automobiles kill a lot more people than guns in New Mexico. And I think we would completely eradicate this problem by that kind of an approach where the seller, not just the buyer, has to show up at an MVD office. And if that seller has not properly registered and owned the vehicle, you can fine them, you can force them to pay the earlier taxes, not the innocent buyer. We could make sure that that vehicle is immediately retitled. We can make sure that it's got insurance when it drives off. And the buyer is also protected because they'll know when they purchase it, whether or not it has a salvage title, for example. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about trying to get done, but they're not easy because these rules have been in place a long time. And what I will tell you about our dealers, our licensed, hardworking, small business folks in New Mexico is, if they get a bad reputation, if they are not taking care of clients and making sure that they're safe and reliable vehicles that are sold, they don't last very long because the internet destroys them. The community word of mouth destroys them. So I want to thank everybody for sort of recognizing how hard these small business people, who really are the backbone of New Mexico's automotive infrastructure, that they really do work very hard to be both good neighbors and good business folks.
Well, I wanted to kind of put a wrap on this and also invite anybody, raise your hand if you're in the Zoom, or if you have a question you want to throw to chat. What I want to do is go around one more time, and if there's any other points that we haven't made or things that wanted to be said before we do a final wrap here, Jerry, was there any other thoughts or takeaways we need to take away from this today?
I just think that the most important thing, we sit here and talk about being able to identify this seller. And in a lot of cases, it makes it difficult because they're not going to be forthcoming with their identity. That's really what this is all about. If it was a legitimate dealer, there's always a way to go back on the business. But I just feel like what we can do now is to educate consumers, to really just keep that in mind. We talk about all these scams. Brian, you brought it up as it being a scam, and that's essentially what it is. But it really hurts the most vulnerable in our state that really are trying to do something to better their lives. And in order to stop that, we really just need to educate them, be available to them. I agree with Jason. I think that these roundtable discussions with all of our agencies are really important to work together in sharing information and helping each other to eradicate these illegal sales. And then, as Mark brought up, I think in most cases the laws, they speak to the dealer in most cases, and really don't have a way to go after an individual. I know it says that that's a misdemeanor for a violation, but when you can't find the person, it makes it really difficult to enforce or have teeth in the law. But all we can do is be here for the consumers again, and just reiterate, please do your due diligence. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. For a few $100s to be able to have someone to fall back on and to go to the business is certainly helpful.
Jason, any parting thoughts?
Other than, it'd be nice to have some, commercials, advertisements. I know Namida's, done a poster and stuff just to get the word out. I don't think people hear about this a lot. It'd be nice to get some education out there, and just, I think that would help until we can get some laws changed or get, law enforcement more involved, and maybe we can have another roundtable with law enforcement so that they know their options. I think a lot of times it's something they don't even really have any idea about, because it's not something that they get called to address a lot of times. So it'd be good to help educate them, and maybe we can all work together and be resources for each other.
Thank you for that. And we have been putting a little bit of budget into trying to get the word out. But, likewise, through paid and unpaid media, it's still such a big problem, and we definitely love more support going forward on that. Brian, any parting thoughts from you?
Just along the same lines as Jerry and Jason, along with education, is awareness. And I think that that's what the main that we wanted to get out of this, with this month being July, and being the awareness month on the curbstoning. So I think that this is a great start. And I will tell you, in getting ready for this, the first article that Victoria, my marketing coordinator, published, that everything has to go through our association with branding and everything else. They were so surprised about this article. They published it nationally with 101 BBBs across North America, but awareness that they didn't even realize that this was going on. And, New Mexico's kind of started on this. So this is a great way for us to partner with New Mexico Independent Auto Dealer and making our relationship stronger, with the Attorney General's office. We deal with them, and lately with a lot of the solar industry businesses and issues that were going on with them. So I think this was a great start for this conversation to continue in the future.
Thank you, Brian. Mark, we'll give you the last shot.
Well, I've probably said everything that needs to be said, except for thank you. This is our first month where we have done this first year. And frankly, we've been surprised at the lack of knowledge about the risks, about the costs. And we're so grateful to partner with so many folks. And I will tell you that we've had a lot of good feedback, and there's going to be more to come, I think, and including the mayor of Albuquerque has agreed to do a curbstoning commission. And we're working with them to try to ensure that maybe there's some at least targeted actions to begin to bring some enforcement there, even in the midst of a historically high crime rate in other areas. So thank you so much. We feel like it's been a really great month. I think we've gotten tons of opportunities to communicate. Excuse me. And we look forward to it. Thank you everyone for participating.
Well, and we want to thank the Better Business Bureau for allowing us this platform and this format to communicate. Of course, I would recommend that you have any other ideas or things that you want to hear about. This is a great format. Reach out to the BBB, bbbsw.org. Reach out on the email. Also invite you to listen to the New Mexico Motorsports Report every Saturday morning on ESPN Radio 101.7. The team, that's 101.7 FM. We're on every Saturday from 8 to 9. We bring up all kinds of topics about events that are going on, but also things that are impacting people that love cars and are in the car community. Of course, you can see we have a lot of professionals that are out there protecting the public and trying to create a better world for all of us. We're being impacted in ways we don't even know. So I want to thank everybody who participated today. Jerry Mates, Jason Wagner, Brian Baca, Mark Powell, and of course the support from Victoria and the staff at the Better Business Bureau, as well as Jada Craddock, who represented the NMAIDA board. Marty Lynn King Gray is coming in staff position starting just like a week or so. So very excited about that. But thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.